You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinesic.
Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I am Tom Kinesic, and this is episode 195. And
we're getting close to that 200 mark.
Yeah, we are getting really close. And today we actually have a recurring guest, but to talk about something a little bit different than the panel they were on before.
I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Because I feel that, you know, the feedback that we've seen sometimes, I think, is a little misunderstood, and I'm really excited because this is something that we both love.
Yeah,
and for the same reasons and different reasons. And sometimes we hear some stirrings, and it's like, I don't know that you really have the full story about this subject. So we want to present that full story so that everyone understands why we feel the way that we do, and we hope that you feel the same way we do also.
Yeah, so we're really proud to be joined today by Steve Castorani. Like I said, he was on, I don't remember what episode it was, but we had that, like, the Business of Native Plants panel 2 years ago? It was quite a while ago now.
It was one of our first rooted discussions, actually.
Yeah, it might have been the first rooted
I think
discussion.
It was, yeah.
And he, if you remember, he was from North Creek Nurseries in Pennsylvania, but he's also a founding member of the American Beauties Native Plants program. Which is something many of you might be familiar with because you could see it in your garden centers. And we want to dive into American Beauties and kind of the history and what it really is. Because I go, like Fran was saying, I'll go on Facebook and I see a lot of stuff knowing what I've been told it is. Yes. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't really line up with what I thought it was. Yeah. So kind of present from one of the originators what it actually is about. So
and we've talked about this on numerous episodes because we've had Daryl Kobeski and Carrie Stanker from Sunset Farmstead, and we've had kind of bits and pieces of this conversation. And then you and I have just had them on Buzz episodes as well. So we just wanted to really dive into it and break it apart and have this conversation.
Yeah. So Steve, why don't you reintroduce yourself and go in a little bit more in depth than I just did about who you are, your nursery, and then we can tie that into American Beauties.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on this podcast. It's been an honor, and thank you, Tom. Thank you, Fran. You guys do a fantastic job. This is amazing what you're doing to spread the word, spread the love on native plants, and really exposing us. And it's amazing. That's 195 episodes. It just seems like, you know,
you're telling me.
So thanks for the introduction. And I know Fran asked a few questions, so I'll try to, and I think the first one that he asked that he sent me an email about was, you know, what was the process of creating the American Beauties native plant brand? And I'll backtrack a little bit just to give it, like Tom asked for that history. So a lot of people know me from North Creek Nurseries as a co-founder of North Creek Nurseries, which is 35 years now that we've been in business. Started a plant propagation nursery with our roots, pun intended, in bringing, at the time, plants for naturalistic landscaping because people didn't use the word native plants and the native plant movement. There was a movement out there, but it was really young. Ecology, in most people's minds, was pretty new, and we were young and had to understand the market and actually develop the market. So we were in the market early on, and an outgrowth of that, many years later. So that was 95. Around 2000. Probably 3, my partner at the time, Dale Hendricks, and I went to visit the New England Grows Trade Show in Boston, and we met one of our customers, Mark Salou from Pride's Corner Farms. And they still are one of our lead customers. And Mark, we didn't have a booth. We were in the aisle and we were talking, and Mark just came up and he looked at both of us and he just threw this challenge out there. And Mark is one of the things about Mark was he was an early believer in branding. Mm-hmm. And you have to kind of go into that because, we created a native plant brand, but we're a propagation nursery. Another backstory here quickly. I, prior to North Creek and still today, own and founded, co-own now, Gateway Garden Center in Hockessin, Delaware. And so we've been involved in the horticultural industry for me over like 43 years now. And when Dale and I met Mark, and throws this challenge out, he looks at us, points his finger, says, "You're native plant guys." And, we're like taken aback, like, "You guys are the native plant guys. And if you don't start a native plant brand, I'm going to start it."
Yeah.
And by the way, you got to find us a charity partner because they do work with, and they've gotten behind it, but they do a brand. At the time, they had just started Sarah Superb Herbs, and they were working with, I think, Marsha Dimes, and still do. But this whole concept, and having a retail store and working with the Delaware Nature Society and the time the Backyard Habitat movement with National Wildlife Federation, I was very familiar with native plants and the movement. I had been at the time and prior, for many years prior, on the Delaware Invasive Species Council, and I can see the train coming. I mean, there's really kind of it's almost they go hand in hand when you start to talk about native plants, and especially back then, it's the hand in glove with invasive species and the pressures, all the pressures that are on our natural ecosystems and the ecology of that. And you can do some deep dives in there. We don't have time for all that, but just kind of a little bit of the backstory. But Mark challenges us to come up with this plant brand, and it's already in my brain, but it's not necessarily something that we as North Creek could bring forward. But Mark being having the larger wholesale nursery, being a believer in brands, and then challenging us, kind of telling us we were the native plant guys, and we probably were the native plant guys, at least in the context of wholesale growers and supplying plants to the wholesale trade. That's kind of where we, even though not every plant we would grow or had grown is a native plant, but we certainly serviced that market and brought a lot of native plants into the trade over the course of our 35 years. So with that challenge, we went off. And I probably did more of it. I had the name in my head. And like I said, I had worked with Delaware Nature Society, and I knew about their program. They're an affiliate of National Wildlife Federation. At the time, I knew the director, Craig Tufts at National Wildlife, set up a meeting down in D.C. with them. And in the first meeting with them, they just looked at us, and I had met Craig before, and they were like, "Where have you been? We've been doing this for 25 years. We have 5 million members, and they're all looking for native plants, and we don't know where to send them." So timing was right. So let's call that, when we really kind of started the brand, it was 2004. So we're really just about 20 years now doing this, which is hard for me to even say. And the brand really kind of launched and did a soft launch with Pride's Corner in 2006. So 18 years of really getting it into the market. And there was a lot of challenges, but we did work with National Wildlife in the early stages of developing the plant palette, and having that conversation. I think that, Fran, you were alluding to is like, well, what's a native plant? Where do you draw the line on, ecosystem services, which again wasn't a word that was really used back then and before, or biodiversity, or native plants and native plant cultivars and horticultural variety. I mean, we didn't really get into it too deeply, but we were talking with National Wildlife and said, well, what is the brand? What is the brand going to represent? Who are our customers? And you have to think back 20 years ago. Where was that movement of native plants, and what was the exposure to the general public at retail, and even still today? So the brand was really focused on an entry-level gardener to get exposure, to bring native plants to the forefront of the garden center. And along with native plants, a lot of times when people come into a retail setting or they want to buy plants for their landscape, they come in with, I've got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And my problem is I've been trying to grow grass under my oak tree for 10 years, and I put grass seed and then it comes up and then it dies. Or I've got this wet spot in my yard and nothing seems to grow there, and short of filling it in and then moving the water somewhere else to create another wet spot, what plants can I plant? And so we started looking at that as solution-based landscaping, and native plants being a segue right into that conversation. So when people come, and then along with that, especially with the Nature Society and working with native plant people that had an awareness, we're very fortunate to be in part of the country where there's a lot of botanic gardens, and there was a movement towards native plants. We're very close to Mount Cuba Center and aligned closely with them now. And even back then, North Creek was from the beginning, and Gateway was and still is. There was more interest in butterfly gardens, or there's millions of birders that come in, or millions of birders out there, and lots of them come in and they want plants to feed their wildlife, or they want plants that are attracted to butterflies, bees, and those things became more and more relevant as years have gone by now. But early on, somebody would come into the garden center and say, where are your native plants? And most people couldn't really answer that question, even the people that worked there. Or if you could, you'd have to take that customer by the hand and walk them around for an hour to 2 hours and say, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, maybe so, and kind of go through a role of showing them what the native plants are, where they are, and they're just commingled in with everybody. They weren't called out.
Yeah.
So American Beauties, this is all part of that concept, is to put a store within a store to anybody can answer that question. Where are your native plants? Where are your butterfly plants? Where are, whatever kind of question that's relative to native plants. And even I always say that, we call them bag boys, but a young person that's just there loading cars. Yeah. Hey, under that banner over there, there's some literature, there's a big sign that says native plants, and hey, anything in those branded pots with the nice tags with information. So, it's putting that package together and getting it into the store.
Yeah.
That would be,
I think
differentiators.
I was going to have a little question there, and he kind of just answered most of it. Was why are brands important? Getting to know Mark over the last couple of years through the Eagle program that we all went through, he does love brands, and it's from a nursery where we don't do anything with brands. It's a little confusing why brands are so popular until I started to really explore them a little more and see, it's the folks that don't know plants. That's their big billboard that, hey, this is what I'm looking for. And I think that's what American Beauties does for native plants.
Like you can say, instead of someone talking to someone that doesn't know plants and you're trying to get them to speak natives, instead of saying, go get that Lobelia cardinalis, you can say, go to the garden center, look for American Beauties. You can't go wrong, and it's important. And I had mentioned before we started, once we start talking, we'll start, you can't see it because of the background, but I started scribbling like so much because you brought so many great points up. And I wanted to just backtrack before we go further, because one of the great points is back in 1995 at North Creek, like I remember being at Conard Pile, our biggest sellers were miscanthus, Japanese silvergrass, Lythrum, we were still selling a lot of. If you had only been native plants, I don't know that North Creek would be where they are today had that been that model at that point, because there wasn't. And that's wholesale. We're not talking about retail. There wasn't that same kind of awareness or market. It was on a different level. And you did create that market. That market didn't really exist back then, but it got people thinking about it. And in that perspective, I don't know if any of us in this native plant market exist the way we are today without what you did back then. And I think we all know that and realize that. That kind of started that movement on a level that made it, it's one thing to grow plants for restoration. Those projects are happening through the government, but just from a public awareness, that's changed. Like where you have to go back in time. It's not what it is today. So like even thinking back,
most people don't know the backstory there on a lot of that. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah. And even like 1995, I don't think Mount Cuba was open to the public yet.
No, it was not.
Yeah, so a lot of these venues that we think about didn't exist yet. There wasn't. It's not the buzzword that it is today. Actually, there's so many people that still think when they talk to us that we're a backyard nursery. It's there's a couple hippies and we're and I wish I were exaggerating, but I'm not exaggerating.
No, he's not at all.
There's still people that think we're just like a small backyard nursery, that we're not like a real nursery, but native plant nurseries. And we just had a panel discussion for Bowman's Wildflower Preserve's Land Ethics Symposium saying, we're, what a native plant nursery looks like what you consider a regular nursery to look like. But I think looking back even to when the start of American Beauties was, you did this so that people could get native plants and be successful. Because without that original success, maybe you don't have the fervor. And I don't know, like looking back, do you think had you started American Beauties back then and it had been all straight species native plants, do you think it would have been as successful off the bat?
No. And I'll give you some backstory. I'm just going to wind back to where you were heading with North Creek, just to fill people in. Yeah, early on in our career, we saw the native plant movement unfolding, and a lot of it was going towards the restoration type landscapes. And we were in two segments of the market where we were in horticulture and ecology, and it's kind of like one of our bylines, where horticulture meets ecology, and that's because of where we came from. Because we kind of blended those two things, and we were selling and we still are selling into both markets. But Dale and I, we had to make some big decisions. When you say miscanthus or other plants that we weren't ecologists, but when you start to grow some of these plants, and they were part of the plant palette. And this goes back to something called the New American Garden that was prominent in the late 80s, early 90s, that was brought about by it was the German natural plant movement, Omi van Sweden, who did a lot of work in DC on public buildings, really changed the aesthetic a bit on the landscape. It started using grasses and pennisedums and then sedums and rudbeckias, and so there was a blend of native and non-native plants, but it evoked this native landscape. And so North Creek had to evolve, and we made some decisions to stop growing plants that we knew and were becoming aware became invasive or, not aggressive in the landscape or problematic. So it's just some backstory.
And I still feel today that where horticulture meets ecology is irrelevant because, let's be honest, we're never restoring back to European settlement. Mm-hmm. We are. I'm sorry.
No, that's a good segue into the actual question you asked.
Yeah,
so, when we started the brand, we could have gone into the straight species and not that we weren't growing and aren't growing straight species. It's just that who was our audience? What are we doing to influence trends in landscaping and bring about a native plant movement? And we're selling to gardeners. We're not selling to restoration landscapes, and we're selling into disturbed environments. We're not selling, most people don't live in pristine, undisturbed environments that are working with restoration. They live in cities. They live in suburbs where, topsoils have been stripped off, and the native plants and invasive species have kind of conquered a lot of that disturbed environment. And that's why I really talk about invasive species a lot, because, to suppress and remove invasive species, to reduce lawn, which is not a native, but everybody has, millions of acres of lawn. So we want to influence people to be success and have them be successful growing native plants. And that includes native plant cultivars, not in American Beauties brand and North Creek. We don't call hybrids of natives. I don't use the nativar word. It really kind of upsets me that word is coined and used freely and still kind of used freely. So, native plant selections, I like to call them, and, open pollinated species and a mix of both of those. But we want gardeners to be successful. We want to give them a gateway to this native plant movement so they understand and they can get butterflies in their yard, and they can start to work pollinators into the mix of plants. They can start to remove the plants that have no value. As Doug Tallamy often says, you can put plastic plants out there because they're not contributing to the ecology of life. And so that was really the premise, and it still is. But one of your other questions that you may want to ask, and you probably will, is like the trend as more people become aware and garden and they learn more about natives, they're incorporating more and more open pollinated species into their landscapes. And American Beauties as a brand is now able to bring more and more of those open pollinated species and more ecotypes, in more locally grown plants in, because they're more accepting of this aesthetic that is really one of the things that has to be overcome for years and years. The more natural landscapes. Not everybody likes those. Not everyone is a gardener. Drive around your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. There's the oddball that still has like a little wild garden out there, and most other people have non-native plants, yew bushes and Japanese hollies, or whatever. Pick your favorite contractor package landscape plant that's been there for 30 or 40 years.
Yep.
That insects don't eat.
Yeah, I think about one of the things that Tom always says: to be successful, it's easy to sell native plants to someone that knows native plants. That's an easy sale. How do you get the guy that's sitting in a hammock in the backyard watching a football game, drinking a beer, to care? And I think you've done that. I think
talk to his wife.
Yeah, but you've made it accessible.
I'd even say, not even the care, just to have him in his yard and not care. And that's what a lot of it was for me, is because to reach that homegrown national park goal that Doug Talmy throws out there, that's what you need. Is I look at my neighbors. I like to garden sometimes. I see my neighbors across the street, they garden some, but driving down the street, there's very few people who are spending any time in their gardens outside of the two of us. But those folks are going to have native plants in their yards to have that homegrown national park.
And just by making them available, you've helped accomplish that. And by branding, they can learn more. They can say, what is this American Beauties? You take the tag, you Google it, you look at the pot, and you find out a little bit more, and you learn the story and their story on the tag. And it's accomplished something, and now maybe that person that 10 years ago bought a couple of those plants is now thinking, what else can I do? Oh, I've learned a little bit. Maybe if I try this, maybe if I try street speed. We always talk about patience and kindness and acceptance, and I think you created something that allows for that person to be a part of it and learn and evolve.
Well, I'm going to go back to something that we don't really toot our own horn about a lot, but something that we could talk about, or I can mention here, because you brought up Homegrown National Park. And when that started to become conceptualized, I worked, and I was like a founding member of the board there, and helped Doug and Michelle figure out the market and work with them and bringing that the concept forward, and then they've kind of taken it from there, and it's a really great thing. So, but American Beauties contributes to that. Financially, we donate money to it. We promote it when we can through our social media. We work with Pollinator Partnership, who's a great. We still work with National Wildlife. We've created a research fund at the Horticultural Research Institute so that we can start funding more native plant research. We donate monies to Doug Tallamy's research at the University of Delaware. So one of the things that was cool about American Beauties is that we have day jobs, and and American Beauties was something that we started, but we didn't kind of think that, this is going to be our livelihood per se. So we could actually, and we knew early on that it wasn't something that was going to be, some business plan that was going to just take the world by storm. It's taken 20 years to get where we are today, and we're still in the early stages of this. And I think, it's great that the native plant movement has moved so far forward since then. But to be instrumental in moving that forward and understanding it, we knew that this was going to be not as much of a business as an education model. We have to be in it for the long term. It's not something that, we started the brand, and we hit the recession in 2007, 2008 through 2010. We had growers that were saying, well, we can't sell a brand and, charge a little more money and, afford to pay for we are paying. What American Beauties does is we get that information out in our website, on our tags. It costs money to do that. So yeah, there's a brand premium on that, but we're giving back. And but when Mark and I looked at this model and we said, hey, we're not going anywhere. We can wait. We solicited and worked with growers throughout. We tried to build some growers. Some growers were in, and then they got out because the financial hardships of that era, and build it back again. And now, we finally have some real good momentum here in the last few years of expanding the market. A good bit throughout the whole East Coast, and now west of the Mississippi, and so we're really looking to grow it and just get more exposure in areas that don't have the brand. But we're realistic in our goals, knowing that it's going to take a good bit of time, and like we're going to educate people one plant at a time.
I think you were a little bit ahead of your time too. You had to wait a little bit, I think, for the market to catch up or to be ready for it. And I think we're finally at that point now where we can do that. And I think part of why it works, it's because it's genuine. It's because I know that the people behind it have a love for this. And I think that shows through. I know Tom and I talk about this. We're fortunate that we get to do this podcast, and we've been doing it almost 4 years. And we're fortunate because people want to listen to it, and we do it because we love doing it. I know you can see that same kind of genuine feeling behind American Beauties of why it's there in the first place. And fortunately, it's good for business too. But I think that's what makes it still exist. But fortunately, it's one of those happy, you get to do it, and fortunately, it brings in money.
Yeah. I mean, but we're. I think what I was trying to say is that it brings in money, and we're actually able now to employ people to do the research, write the copy, write the work, the website, speak to other growers, go out and kind of solicit people to grow the plant material. Look for plants to it takes a lot.
Yeah. And the bigger it gets, the more good you can do, which is wonderful. Yeah. So going.
Thanks for saying that.
No problem. I think that gets lost sometimes, even with what we all do. That it's still a business. Like, we still have to be profitable, and by doing that, we can get bigger and do more good, because that's what we all feel passionate about. But going back just a little bit, the original idea behind what was going to be in American Beauties, what was the thought process behind kind of making those initial selections of this is what American Beauties is going to be?
Well, I kind of alluded to that early on when we first started. Dale and I were growing plants, and mostly in the perennials and grasses and ferns, but woody plants make up a really important component. Trees do, and trees were slow, to put into the brand, because not all of the growers grew trees, and then growing trees of an appropriate garden center size. And fortunately, I think we're right along with Doug Tallamy, as he was kind of like bringing that awareness, and he did a lot for the program, without maybe him even knowing it. Is just nature's best hope, and bringing it forward with the story of oaks and how important trees are, and how they are host plants for the Lepidoptera, and so they were all in parallel there as we worked forward. But I talked a little bit early on with National Wildlife, and trying to make that decision. Well, who are we marketing to? How are we going to sell these plants? And one of the things that people maybe misunderstand, I think maybe this is where you're thinking of going, is that a native plant in the Northeast is maybe not going to be the same native plant that's in St. Louis. But there is overlap. And one of the things we learned as we've gone around the country and talked to growers and looked at different markets, we're a little bit. It's a lot easier here in the East Coast from a native plant perspective, and the way ecology and plants evolved here. There are more like kind native plants. I mean, maybe if you get into the biodiversity, and you can do seed selections for the North and South, but I use Acer rubrum as an example. I mean, Acer rubrum is native from Florida to Maine, right? So that's a wide range. Probably native through a good bit. Schizophyrium, the bluestone, is native through a good bit of the country. So, but when you get to places like Arizona, Your plant pal is very limited, or you get even more specifically. We worked in Oregon for a while, and it's hard to get a grower in Oregon because you get a grower, but a lot of native plant nurseries are small and they're very niche, and it's because they're working in microclimates. They're working with elevation. They're working with one side of a rainforest that's on the coast, and then you go over the Cascades, and you're in dry areas, and you also have the same thing in Colorado with high plains, and so you have different ecologies, and in the Northeast and the mid Atlantic and the Midwest, it's a little more homogeneous with the plant material, and the lines are a little blurred. So it's given us an opportunity to get more plants into the market, and not to say that we do our homework to tell people where the plants are native to, and put that information on the tag, and we have the bonat maps on the website. And so people can get the information if they really care about it and want to really know, drill down into that. But it'll be more challenging as we get to other parts of the country. We did have a grower in Oregon for a while, and they were a consequence of the recession that I alluded to earlier. But we'll be challenged. But I think some of those examples that we'll have, instead of the larger nurseries that we're able to have in the East that can kind of deliver across state lines, we'll have probably smaller nurseries that are selling American Beauties in other markets, which is okay. But we really look at nurseries that focus into retail, at least initially. But as Mark has told me, and Tim Kane at Pride's Corner, they're seeing about 40% of the plants that are in American Beauties at branded going into landscape projects now.
Yeah.
So there's an evolution where the brand was originally slated to go into retail, and it was pretty much our focus. But as more plants have gotten out there, and more understanding, and more landscapes are calling for, and more states are using and requiring native plants to be part of public projects, American Beauties is starting to transition into not just directed to retail oriented and garden customers, but they're actually going into commercial landscapes or to restoration landscapes, if appropriate, with call it open pollinated species.
We've heard that from some of the American Beauties growers that, hey, this isn't just going to a garden center. These are going to jobs. And that just shows that demand has grown, and there's still a lack of material out there, and they're looking for means, and it's the right size.
Stay tuned for more of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
So American Beauties are mostly 1 gallon containers. Am I correct?
The perennials are typically 1 gallon to 2 gallon, but the majority are 1 gallon.
Yeah.
And shrubs typically are 2 or 3s. We have trees in 3 to 5s. We don't really go much bigger than that, but I can tell you, Price Corner has just seen that tree expansion into the tree market really go, because they're finding that consumers can handle planting a 5, 7, maybe a 7 gallon, 3, 5, and 7 gallon tree, and get a tree in there, and we're creating whole landscapes. It's not just a perennial garden. It's essential to have. When you're working with pollinators and you're trying to attract pollinators, it's not just like, let's have a great meadow garden. Mm-hmm. You want a garden that's starts out with trees that are blooming early in the season, and perennials that are providing nectar late in the season, and then all of the ecosystem services between there, whether it's a rain garden plant, or it's a plant that has other attributes, like it's a larval food source, like, everybody can, look to Asclepius or the oak species, or, you name it. There's quite a few of them.
And I think it was important that you mentioned about having growers across the country, because these aren't all being produced in a factory in one spot and growing. No. And those growers are
never our intention. It was really to have a network of growers that were really specific to regions, that grow specifically to those, and have regionally appropriate native plants throughout the country.
Yeah, they're not growing the whole line. They have flexibility to say these are the ones that are appropriate for the area that I'm in.
Absolutely. Where they ship to.
Yeah. Which is wonderful. I think that's great. And we've heard such good things from some of the growers, and it's nice to see the practices. And that's what I thought it would be a good segue to what's changed since inception and where we're going. Like, American Beauties is a neonic-free program, correct?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was something that we had to insist upon and change and really, I would say, influence growers to get them to have an understanding that, we are selling life-sustaining plants for insect life, which eventually becomes bird life. And we cannot have our customers buying plants that are harmful to insects that may be eating those plants that, provide a larval food source to feed birds. And many of they're not just native plant growers. I mean, they're not maybe just perennial growers. They're growers that are growing a host of different plant species, and have a lot of challenges out there, as you guys know. You're growers. I mean, there's a lot of things that want to eat plants.
Oh yeah,
bad. But really, to make this program successful, we had to really look to change how plants were grown that were going to be sold into this program. And neonicotinoids is really kind of the beginning of that, to get those all out of our specific niche.
Do you know how many different plants you grow now compared to at the beginning, or how many different species, or how many different?
Well, a lot of times when a grower gets into the market, they have they'll start with a limited palette of maybe the top selling plants, or the ones that they have the highest awareness in their market, and then as the program gets grounded and they can expand it and there's more demand for it, they will increase their offerings. I'll go back to Pride's Corner, because they're the initial grower and started the program. They're well over 200 different species.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well over maybe 300. I don't know exactly, but then you start adding that up, and then you have overlap. Like a Willoway nursery in Ohio might be growing some of those plants, but then they have some regional things that are Midwest. And Midwest ground covers out in Chicagoland doesn't grow all the. So so it might be 400. I didn't come prepared for that answer. But
sorry.
It's a lot, and it's grown from a very, very a limited palette to an expanding palette. We had a grower in Arizona for many years, and so we were growing cactus and agaves, and different things that were, and actually, we still have the list, and we'll continue to work with growers in different parts of the country. We have a grower in St. Louis now, so that that they're going to be looking at more prairie species.
Is there a specific market that you've seen an uptick with awareness? Like, I would imagine that the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic are probably the biggest hotspots for
we're seeing certainly Riverbend Nursery just came along, and they're pushing the program down into Georgia, Tennessee, and population centers typically, because that's where people live, but Chicagoland is a big area, and there's awareness out there. I would say I'll throw Cincinnati out there. So there's a big movement in Cincinnati, for native plants, but a lot has to do with our relationship with the Cincinnati Zoo, and it's aligning ourselves. North Creek has done it over the years. American Beauties is getting out there, getting awareness, working with people that are influencers in different markets to understand this native plant movement and kind of can help us co-promote the brand.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I just had a discussion with somebody the other day about like plant markets in particular. And so much of their point was, sometimes it's just you find the right person in a different area and all of a sudden that's a hot zone for you. And you're going to have all kinds of business in there because they're going to tell their friends and then their friends, they tell their friends. And as long as they're happy with your product, then you have a whole new growing market. So that's interesting to hear. You're saying you link up with these influencers in that area, and you're
and I can bring that down to the local level because when we start to talk to growers about, they might be tepid about, I don't know if I can sell this stuff. We haven't really sold a lot of natives, even though they're selling natives, they're just not branded, And I'll say, if you go to a garden center, there's always a person at any garden center. They might not be the owner of the garden center, but there is an enthusiast at that garden center. You got to find that enthusiast. Mm-hmm. And you come in and talk to the owner and say, hey, you have somebody that really is a birder. Mm-hmm. There's always a birder, And that's the hook. You got to get somebody that really understands. And more, there's more people that are aware of native plants that work at garden centers. But early on, it was trying to find, and convince a grower, hey, who in your organization really aligns here? And oftentimes the business owner is not that person. It's somebody that's working for them, that's passionate about plants, passionate about native plants, passionate about bird gardening, planting for wildlife. Restoration or whatever. And that's how you get into the market. Mm-hmm. And that's how you expand the market is finding, people. And you guys know, you go to a lot of conferences and you can see, from a horticultural sense and from local nature societies and such, there's a movement afront and, we're all happy to be on the forefront of that movement. And I'm very fortunate that it's, happened in my lifetime. Because it did take a while. Yeah. I was thinking that early on, and when you're describing this and saying, 2004, 2006, and I'm like, man, it does take a while sometimes. And I made a joke the other day. It is true in as well. But I was giving a presentation, and I said, well, thank God my parents decided to start a native plant nursery for 40 years ago because we're in great shape right now. We're in the perfect position to like do so much good stuff. But to start now, we'd be way too late. I say the same thing. It's like, I wish your age.
Yeah. Well, I think back, I started here in 2007, and I can't remember how many countless times I had the phone call where I was explaining to someone what a ring garden was. And I think for the most part, a lot of that's pretty common knowledge now. But back then, that was our first poster that we did to try to help educate what a ring garden was and why you should want one or use one and the importance of it. So it's definitely changed a lot, and I kind of feel like a little like it's almost like goosebumps like right now, like where we're at and where we're headed, like over the next few years. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a good segue just to talk about what the future of American Beauties is. What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years of what American Beauties will be and where it's going?
Well, I probably touched on it a bit. I think the movement's a front. It's great to be in this. We're actually seeing where we didn't have, I would call competition. There are people selling plants for sure, but other growers are starting to do more branding, and they're going to be in the marketplace. And I think competition is good because it raised, it's the high tide that's raising all the ships. So I don't feel threatened. In North Creek, on the other side of my life, that's great for us as a liner producer too. But for American Beauties, it's really expanding the market, raising awareness, continuing to market ourselves. I talk early on about how the market's changed a bit. I gave a talk up at Rhode Island to the Rhode Island Wild Plant Society, and their members are really looking for more open pollinated species. And it's not always easy. And as plant propagators, not everything propagates well commercially for restoration or for to get the quantities we need into the marketplace as an open pollinated thing. So trying to get an understanding and to get people that aren't plant propagators or don't really understand that side of it to understand that we do the best we can. If we can grow it from seed and it's good garden variety, we will. But I think there's a movement at front for sure.
That's a good point, and that's very difficult
in the to increase biodiversity and have more plants. And we're seeing a trend at North Creek and at American Beauties to get more open pollinated species into the program, and people actually asking for that more at retail and looking towards it because they're becoming a more sophisticated gardener, and that kind of is what we wanted to. It's where we wanted to go when we started. We might not have known it then.
Yeah, Fran, before you go here, you did touch on one thing, and I was going to ask it, and you already half answered it. But with that idea of competition in the brand space, because we are seeing some more native plant specific brands coming out now, and I always thought I talked with one of your sales reps probably like 5 years ago now, saying like, do you think competition in that space would actually boost overall native plant sales? How there's like all the proven winners stuff and first editions and endless summer, and like you go into the garden centers, all the colored pots are basically the different brands, whatever it says on is the brand. But it's like if you had competing native plant brands, like would it actually boost the entire market? Because now there's not one, there's multiple. But it kind of sounds like you think that kind of is the case.
It is the case, and even when we have growers now that are servicing the same markets, we have more growers that are overlapping into the same sales areas. Well, that's a good thing. I'm a garden center owner too. I'll put that hat on, for a moment and say, well, because we can buy plants that are maybe coming from a little further north or a little further south or a little further west, we can buy maybe the same plant and offer to the customer in color, or even in leaf at a different, it extends our selling season, and it gets refreshes our benches at retail. So this is talking from the retail perspective, but it really helps not every grower is they're going to be sold out of something. And if a retailer has a demand for winterberry hollies and one grower's out of them, they have, and in American Beauties, they can go to 2 or 3 sources that are fairly local now. And I think that's the idea, is that there'll be more local nurseries that have the brands, and whether it's an American Beauties brand or another brand. I think just that some people that maybe aren't necessarily plant people, but they walk in and they, were accustomed to seeing proven winners everywhere. Now they're seeing native plant brands. They're going to say, hey, there must be something to this. Why, and a lot of people get it. They say, oh, if it's a native plant, that must mean it really, it survives better in my area. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, So I think that's all good for us, good for growers, good for ecology, good for the marketplace.
I agree. If you think about it, do you think Coke would have sold as much cola had it not been for Pepsi?
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know, because you have the two of them competing for market share, both pumping marketing dollars in there just to promote cola. And without one, does the other one ever have the same amount of success? I don't know. It's like
did you ever notice that when you're driving down the street and you see like a fast food chain, and then all of a sudden there's like 2 more that pop up next to them?
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
Exactly. Does Larry Bird become the legend without Magic Johnson? I don't know. It's all those things. And I think about Tom's father, Don, saying how he used to worry early at trade shows. He's like, there was a time where I'd go and there'd be 3 native plant growers, and then the next year there'd be 6, and I'd worry maybe this is the end for us. But since I've been here, our competition's tripled, and we still can't, as a whole, supply the demand that's out there.
Right. Yeah, we're fortunate right there.
Yeah, and it's if you want to see someone give up, just the first thing you have to do is lack of availability. if you want someone to give up their search, if they've searched 5 or 6 places and they can't get it, they're eventually just going to buy whatever it is they can find. And I think just the market's not close to being oversaturated. Now, will we see that point one day? It's possible, but we're not there. And I think this movement's only growing with the education that's involved with invasives and everything else. I think if we can just work together to, one of the things I was going to mention when you mentioned open pollinated as an industry, we can't decide what's native. We can't decide what's local provenance, what's the correct ecoregion, what's open pollinated. Is it a mile radius? Is it how far can these plants be from each other? That's the only ones I think standing in the way are ourselves. if we can,
you have climate change that's going to influence things. I mean, there's a lot of external factors that we really don't know. I mean, it's evolution, right? I mean, we're seeing the markets evolve. We're seeing plants evolve. There's certainly pressures. I mean, I know there's a lot of concern in the native plant movement, the ecology movement of dilution of species, so that we can go into a lot of different crazy, not crazy, but tangents here, to discuss. But I'm not an expert. I mean, I just I'm happy that the native plant movement is robust, and we've been able to kind of get more people to learn and understand the market that weren't planting natives many, many years ago. And that goes back to where we started with American Beauties, is to raise awareness here, because there wasn't an awareness back when we started.
Do you know, and I know I just thought of this and you're not prepared for this. Do you know, since its inception, how many American Beauties plants have been sold?
Plants?
Yeah, just total plants.
No, I don't have the 20-year number. But,
well, it doesn't really put it anywhere near in perspective, but you were talking about how you don't like tooting your own horn about all the donations that you've made. But I recall seeing an article a handful of years ago about some of the donations you've made to Doug Tallamy's work and all that. And it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which means that you've had lots and lots of plans help pay for that.
Dollars that we've donated.
Yeah. So it's
and probably over a million, over a million. I don't know how many, it's over 1 million plants, but I don't know how many,
Can we get you build like a big AB sign like McDonald's? Yeah. Like with it, we'll start clicking off how many.
Yeah. But I think that kind of puts in perspective that it's not a small amount of plants that have gone out the door and
it's
helped improve people's gardens. And by replacing
it's not a small amount of plants at this point. It's probably like, if I actually had to hear that number and we actually did that, I'd be kind of like, pleasantly surprised. Yeah. But it would be a lot. I mean, it would be, like I said, over,
it's done a lot of good.
Millions.
Yeah. It's put native plants in the hands of a lot of people that maybe would have never had that opportunity. Yeah. And it's done a lot of good.
And the thing that differentiates us too, as a true brand, is the way I like, to look at brand. We're a brand of native plants. We're not a brand of a specific plant that is kind of like fashionable today. And I'll tell you that next year we'll have a new, I'll use hydrangeas because I can pick on those. I'm out there. But, I'll convince you that our hydrangea is the best hydrangea that's ever been bred and made, and it blooms for the longest and has, whatever attributes it has. And then within a couple of years, I'm going to tell you, well, this new one's better because you got to buy that one. The difference with American Beauties is that, these are plants that are really important, and you need different plants. You don't necessarily need more of the same thing. You need biodiversity, right? So we need to get more plants. We need to expand the plant palette of offerings for all the different soil types and all the different sun or shade, or wet or dry, or windswept, or whatever, rocky crevices, or loamy soil. I mean, they're sky's the limit on all the different places that differentiate where the different plants will thrive.
And they click all the boxes. Are they helping the wildlife? Check. Are they helping pollinators? Check. Is it a lifestyle plant? Check.
Soil stabilization. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's clicking all those boxes. And we didn't really say this. Where are American Beauties found if you wanted to buy them? Are they strictly independent garden centers? Are they found in chain stores? Where?
No, they're all in independent garden centers.
Okay.
They're not in true chain large box retailers. And we kind of made that decision to differentiate the brand so that the independent garden centers typically have people that are selling and they're knowledgeable. And we really, I went back to where we started. It's a program of education. We have to educate consumers, and it's just not a pretty plant in the pot. I mean, it could be a very pretty plant in the pot. I take that back, but
that's one of the boxes it checks. Is it
one
beautiful?
Of the boxes
yes.
It checks, but hey, it's for soil stabilization, where it takes wet feet, or have whatever the characteristic it is. But when somebody comes in and they have need a solution for their landscapes, there's a lot of boxes these native plants check, and that's one of the reasons we really focused on independent garden centers, and to give independent garden centers an edge on. I've seen native plant programs in some box stores that are not American Beauties. They languish there because the selection's not correct. The employees really don't know what they are or how to sell them. The consumer is not really educated. There's not a lot of information. So working with independents, there are some of the wholesale growers that are looking at or are selling into called retail mail order. But our focus is really the retailer and the re-wholesaler and the wholesale market now, the growers that we work with.
It's funny. It's funny because if you talk to chain stores or nurseries that sell into chain stores, I shouldn't say if you talk to chain stores, if you talk to nurseries that sell into chain stores and you mention natives, they're quick to say it won't work. They're like, that's not going to work.
Yeah. It's very difficult for them to make it work. But garden centers, they move more product and they move more product through, and they work on displays more, and that's a little bit. As I heard when I was really young and not really understanding retail, but retail is detail, and if you want to sell product at retail, you have to have the detail. You have to kind of know what you're doing and give plants their prominence. And like I said, with the American Beauties brand, it really. It's nice. We do displays. We incentivize some of the garden centers that want to participate to have programs, to do bench displays. They take photographs, and we work with the salespeople for those nurseries to kind of make sure that those things look good at retail, because we want consumers to say, "Hey, I didn't know native plants were really that sexy."
No, that's awesome. And as long as they pick that plant up, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
So, exactly. So, Tom, before I change the subject, do you have any other questions?
You're good, Fran.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think it goes without saying that you're an inspiration to both Tom and I and a lot of other people in the industry that we deal with all the time. And we thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. We we've had this conversation a bunch of times with a lot of people over the last couple months, actually. Who inspires you? What are your current inspirations for doing this?
Well, I'll start with the person I mentioned is Doug Tallamy. Doug, Doug will refer to me as the business guy. And that's when he pushed me, into the Homegrown National Park because I glaze over at business. But a lot of the researchers, people that are prominent in promoting the native plant, a guy, promotes all plants, saw him recently, Steve Foltz at the Cincinnati Zoo. He's out there interfacing with the public and just raising the level of gardening. My former professor, Dr. Leidy at the Mount Cuba Center, when he was there as the first director to bring it public, I just know so many great plants people that have inspired me. It's just kind of hard to list everyone. A guy that wasn't in the native plant movement at the time, but Dr. Apps. Just people that nurtured you into understanding plants and how plants grow, and my partner Dale, Mark Salou. There's a lot of people that I can point out.
And you've had a lot of fantastic people come through your organization as well.
I don't people that work for me. Yeah, my general manager Tim McGinty.
I worked with him. Yeah,
Angela, who you guys know well. Does a fantastic job selling and works with all our growers, and represents North Creek to the growers and does a fantastic job explaining the plants, because a lot of times the growers need help. They haven't grown this specific plant. How does it grow? So we as North Creek try to help the growers be successful, and we have to learn a lot. That's why I go to the researchers, the people that actually are putting some of the science behind it.
And Claudia West was an employee of yours.
Claudia West, what an inspiration! I saw her here in New York when we were there a couple of days ago. Claudia has been just amazing for the movement of plants and native plants and ecological landscapes.
That's speaking of inspiration. The first time I saw her speak,
Pete Aldoff. Even though he's not a native plant guy, but what he's done for inspiring people, and how many millions of people visit the High Line every year. A couple million people. They're getting exposed to plants, and then when they dig down, oh, that's a native plant. I didn't know that was a native plant. And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Tom just brought back a pamphlet from the High Line where it highlights, Keep It Wild, and it highlights all the native plants that they have on the High Line and where you can find them. And that's fantastic just to bring it to people's attention. Like, hey, these things are here. Make sure you stop, take a look, find some inspiration. And it's all about finding inspiration. I was going to say the first time I heard Claudia speak was while she was working for North Creek Nurseries, and it was just setting that tone of what it could be. And it could be anything your heart desires. And it's think about it in a different way. And I feel that you've promoted that throughout the story. And we all can't thank you enough.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been a good thing. It's great to see this evolve. I know, mentioning Claudia, I know she spoke often about why plants are really important, and all plants.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But now it comes to the most uncomfortable question, the worst question of them all. And I know we had this conversation beforehand, and you've actually answered this question before. I should have gone back to look to see what your answer was. And we always give it with the caveat. It's the shortest question, but the most difficult. And it's, what is your favorite native plant? Now, we won't hold you to one, and we won't hold you that answer is forever. It can be.
I understand. And actually, thanks for giving me like a little heads up on this, because I told you I hate anybody asks this question, I'm like, oh, not that question. But I thought of a few relative things, and I just want to say that it might be what's now in that, but the importance, I think, in answering that question, and I alluded to it in in conversation is to make sure that with native plants that you're having a complete palette of plants throughout the calendar year, especially when you're thinking through wildlife and thinking of wildlife, and and I want to name a few plants,
All right.
and not many, but I just, oaks and white oaks, and oaks are just really super important. I'll, ride Dr. Talmy's coattails on that, and but early blooming trees, and then the evolution. I mean, I put down Pachyraria as one of my favorite plants because it holds the ground. It's evergreen in the wintertime. In my front yard, I have a display of, supposed to be more of like, Pachyraria specifically for a little wetter environments, but I have it growing in some dry ground, and it just makes a carpet of yellow flowers in in April. It's just great. And Pycnanthemum uticum probably is that plant right now that if you had to pick one plant that was like the pollinator magnet of the summertime, it would be that plant, and silver foliage and beautiful bracts, and it's not the showiest flower, but if you put a bunch of pollinators on top of that, man, it's nothing showier. It's one of the nicest things. And I'll just mention two other things I really like. I like the native sumacs and sassafras being one of my favorite trees. So for fall color and stuff. And then to wrap it up, it's always like I mentioned earlier, like there's a whole host of asters out there. And I know they have changed their botanic name, but group them in as asters. And there's asters for shade and dry shade, and for sun, and for different sizes and different colors and textures. And what I do like about like Aster divaricatus, I mean, the winter interest. I mean, the seed, the plant, the stature of the plant, it holds up through the winter. It looks great in the snow. So didn't answer your question, but
I love that you covered each season. Actually, that was great, and I couldn't agree more with you on all of those. They're all fantastic plants with wonderful merits that could be in anyone's garden, and they would be successful and happy. So that is wonderful. We're at the point where we always end it the same way, and we do final thoughts, and we let you start off, and this is a time where we hand the microphone over to you, the floor over to you. You can use the time however you want. You can summarize, promote something, mention something we missed, but the floor is yours, and Tom and I will take a turn after you're done.
Well, I think I've said a lot, and I don't want to, kind of reiterate what I've kind of said already, but first of all, I want to thank you two for hosting this platform. It's just been fantastic knowing what you've done, being part of it a couple of times, all the different people you've had on the program. So I think you're doing a tremendous service.
Thank you.
Not just for the industry, for the public, for your, thousands, I probably would imagine, listeners.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know how many thousands. It's kind of like you asking me how many.
Yeah.
We actually, we are actually
how many plants I've sold.
I'll throw the stat out there. We are close to like 20,000 downloads a month.
There you go.
For listeners.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I just thanks for shining a light on the importance of native plants, and bringing helping bring the story of, American Beauties, which is maybe a little bit misunderstood sometimes, of like why would they brand a native plant, and what was the purpose of that, and why would you do something like that? It's a native plant, you should know better. People should know. People don't know. And I think one of the reasons that we were out there promoting this is to just raise awareness. And, we all, all of us plant enthusiasts, native plant enthusiasts, really, that's what we do. And we want more people to embrace it. We have to talk about the biodiversity crisis in our world, but we don't want to scare people. We want them to have, empower them. I think that's really what I want to say. What we're doing, what you guys are doing, what your listeners are doing should be empowering the general public, the uninitiated, the initiated, anybody that can gain a better understanding of why native plants are so important in increasing biodiversity and bringing life to your garden.
Awesome. Yeah. That is a wonderful thought. I love that. Tom, you want to go or you want me to go?
Yeah, no, I can go. Basically, yeah, my big final thought here is that one of my things that I always hated seeing, and I brought this up earlier, is a lot of people trying to be helpful on Facebook groups, but they don't have all the information correct, and that goes as far as saying, if it's well, it's okay to correct someone. Oh, that's not a native plant. This is a native plant. But when it goes down to like really going hard on critiques of some of the cultivars of native plants and saying, oh, they're genetically mutated and bred and all this stuff, that's probably more often than not the case, specifically with native plants. Yeah. But and there's so many of these open pollinated cultivars that are out there that American Beauties has many of them. And while it may not be the perfect plant for you, that's a great option for many, many other people, especially when they're just getting their toe or dipping their toes into native plants and going to the garden center and say, I want to get more butterflies in my yard. And I'd rather the person at the garden center point them to the American Beauties display than the butterfly bush or something like that. So this is a great introduction for that gardener who's getting into it, and a great option for a lot of people. You can get seed-grown native plants through American Beauties. It's just because it's in that colorful pot doesn't devalue it to be if you're a native plant purist. So,
fantastic thought, Tom. Thank you for bringing those points up. I just wanted to say overall that this is, we're telling the story of native plants just over the last couple decades. But in order to know where we're going, you have to understand where we've come from. Mm-hmm. And it's learning the whole story. And we've come a long way. And to get to where we're at now was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of education. It was a lot of fights. It was a lot of loss. It was a lot of, there were a lot of years where it wasn't stylish to grow native plants, and it wasn't easy to make sure that you were growing and taking care of your employees. And we're fortunate where we're at a place where we can all do a lot of good, and we do that together. This is a community, and we all respect each other, and we look to each other for advice and help, and we do that all the time. And I couldn't be more proud of an organization. And I know I'll bring this up. When we were in Chicago in October, we heard the CEO of a company say he was formerly of M&M Mars, and if he was walking down the street and saw the CEO of Nestle, he would have crossed the street and grumbled obscenities under his breath. We can embrace each other and have dinner in our industry, and I love that. And we're all there for each other, and the same way our listeners can be there for people that are just learning about native plants or starting the journey. And we need to be helpful and lift everyone up and help them along. So it took a lot of work by a lot of people to where we are today. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at, and we're moving forward, and it's a very bright future. That's my final thought.
Yeah, cool. So, that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you very much for joining us and listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery. If you want to learn more about American Beauties, native plants, they have a fantastic website with all the different plants that are provided by their growers. They have a map that you can go on and find garden centers in your area. It's not applicable to everyone in the country, but if you're in the Northeast and Midwest, you have, I was glancing at it while we were talking, and there are a ton of options. I can't guarantee you're going to be able to find exactly what you want at any of those options, but you'll have a good head start versus just popping in and hoping that something's there for you. So and definitely looking more into North Creek Nurseries as well. They're really, I would say, if not one of the leaders, one of the leaders. I said that backwards, didn't I? In in this native plant movement from a grower perspective. And really glad, Steve, we're able to call you a friend and a mentor of ours as well. So
thank you, guys.
So big thank you to the Egocentric Plastic Men for contributing our theme music. Make sure you stream or buy their music wherever you consume music. Thanks to Dave Bennett for our native plant anthem. You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at nativeplants_healthy planet, and also YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. Don't forget, we have the question and comment line. You can call us at 215-346-6189. I will repeat that, 215-346-6189. Ask a question or leave a comment. We'll do our best to play it on a future episode of The Buzz. And thank you to all the new members of the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. It's been growing leaps and bounds.
Yeah, so you can buy Native Plants Healthy Planet merch at our website, www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. There's t-shirts. We got to put the stickers on there as well. There's a way to do it. I just haven't figured that out yet. There's all kinds of aprons, phone cases, and that's our way of humbly donating some money to some of these organizations. We don't keep any of the profits from that. We just take it, put it in our PayPal account. When it reaches a number that we're comfortable giving out, then we send it to someone who's doing or an organization we feel is doing really good boots on the ground work with native plants, where a couple $100s will go a long way. So, and then you can listen to our podcast wherever you're listening right now, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podbean. Any of those platforms. And if you can, do us a favor, hit subscribe, leave a review, 5 stars, please. If you do a little write-up with that review, I give you a big shout out on our Buzz episodes. And I got to tell you, outside of the reviews, I have a really long list for our next Buzz episode. So if you don't like all the shout outs, maybe get you ready to hit your skip button for at least 10 times. Yeah. So with that, everyone, thank you again. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thanks again, everyone. Steve, again, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Coming up next week, we have a new episode of The Buzz. So make sure you tune in. And until then, keep it native.
Woods, wetlands, and dales grows a bounty of beauty that never fails. Our native plants, so diverse and so rare, treasures of our land beyond compare. From the ferns below, soaring oaks above, each plant has a place each family's love. Monarch caterpillars launch milk, wheat so tall, bees buzz about, sipping nectar fall. Oh, native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand. To preserve our generations of calm and beauty and potency second to none. To protect and preserve the earth, to restore the native plant movement you just can't ignore.
Goldenrod, asters, and flowers galore. Monarch is so stunning, can't help but adore. Your colors, the fragrance, a feast for the eyes. Their value to wildlife, no need to disguise.
Native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.